Well, hello and welcome to our book launch with Darin Brown on his first book called Crooked River Stories. Woo-hoo! Yeah, it's great. We have some friends here, at least 500.
At least 500.
Sounds like five, but
500 at least.
500 at least. And Darin today we're gonna start off by asking you a few questions about your book, and then we're gonna hear from some of your friends that are closest to you that have read it and see what it meant to them so far. So,
awesome.
Tell us a little bit about your book. What is it about? Why'd you write it?
Okay. So I grew up, as many of you know, in rural Missouri. I grew up near a river called the Gasconade, one of those strange rivers that runs south to north. And so it zigs and it zags. One writer said it's one of the crookedest rivers in the world. And so it's kind of like a metaphor for perseverance. One of the quotes in the prologue of the book says that a water cuts through rock, not by power, but by persistence. So this is a river that just will not give up. Like I said, it winds its way through the Ozark Plateau, eventually empties into the Missouri River and then into the Mississippi. But so the book is really a collection of what I call never quit narratives, and it covers a variety of topics because as we think about our lives, perseverance comes up just all over the place, right?
Right.
It comes up like if you're struggling financially, if you're dealing with pain, self-esteem issues, faith, marriage, work. So each chapter talks about a different aspect of my life growing up, as well as different people that I've ran into over the course of my life who have taught me and continue to teach me about perseverance. I wrote the book because I've never told this to anyone before, but secretly when I was young, I wanted to be John Boy Walton. I know that's an old reference, but he was the writer, right? The Big Chief Notebook and all that. So I wrote this quote down. Actually, Maya Angelou says that there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. And so the reason I wrote this book, there's some stories that just kind of had to come out. And over the years, as I've shared these stories verbally with people, people didn't run out of the room. You know, people actually listened and liked the stories. And so I'm really hoping that the book does in fact help people who are struggling through some of these things that I talked about. Or maybe they're stuck and they've kind of lost their will to kind of keep going. And so that's what the river taught me. That's what life has taught me. It's what God has taught me. It's what Scripture has taught me, just to push through these things. And so I'm hoping that a number of people can find some help in these stories. And then I hope that a number of people who, of course, there's a lot of, I'm a follower of Jesus, and so there's a lot of that in the book, but I'm hoping that a number of people will find this book who maybe don't even follow Jesus yet, that they'll also find this book and find something helpful in it to get them through hard stuff.
Yeah, you see it throughout the whole book, just God using all of these kind of hard times in your life for good, and showing his good and his grace. Great stories. I want to read the back of the book.
Yep.
It says, when the latest advice from your favorite self-help book, TED Talk, and life coach can no longer help you push through your most recent challenges, enter Crooked River Stories. Inspired by Missouri's little-known Gasconade River, deemed one of the crookedest rivers in the world, Crooked River Stories takes you on a wild river ride to places you've never been before, but will be glad for having visited. Each chapter in this never give up narrative provides heartwarming, belly-laughing, and often gut-wrenching moments addressing the problems and pain common to the human experience. If you've ever or are currently struggling through poverty, pain, the tragic loss of a loved one, foreboding evil, depression, low self-esteem, lack of motivation, or doubts about your faith, jump in the boat for an incredible and winding journey with those who have navigated similar waters and disembarked on the shores with a newly discovered confidence, purpose for life, and hope for the future. So you kind of touch on it, but what is different about Crooked River Stories in terms of addressing how people can push through challenges in their life? How is it different?
So first of all, that back paragraph I just read took me a day to write, so I looked at it. But so yeah, I think with no disrespect to counselors. By the way, I'm going to buy this hoodie that Jackie Hill Perry has. It says Jesus and therapy, because that's a great thing, right?
Yeah.
So no disrespect to life coaches or counselors or TED Talks or self-help books, because all those things are part of what's helping people. But I think what's different about my book as it relates to that is that often in these things you get helpful steps, okay, or principles, and I'm not giving you steps, I'm giving you stories, all right? And I think sometimes stories grab people in a different kind of way and can come at problems with a different kind of angle. So I think that's one thing that's different about. The other thing, it's not just a story, and it's not just like a story that just is about my life. In fact, the title's a bit of a misnomer because it's called A Memoir of Perseverance, but it's actually several stories and has an amazing cast of characters throughout the book in it. And so I think that's a little bit unique as well. Also, when we come to the topic of getting through hard things, there's a lot of humor in the book. That's kind of my personality. And let's face it, sometimes life is just so stupidly hard and difficult. You just have to laugh, right? You just have to say, how could anything else kind of go? So there's a lot of humor in the book. And the other thing that's, I think, that some of the early readers have said, it's a very honest book as well. There's one chapter in the book, I think, called Dear Acceptance, where I just talk about how rough it was getting through middle school and high school with low self-esteem stuff. And my daughter Jenna tells me she hasn't heard this discussed very much from the male's perspective. So I think there's some real honesty in here. I kind of poured my heart and soul into the book. I know every author does that too, but so those are some of the things I think that make it a little bit different.
Do you have a favorite chapter in the book?
Okay. Yeah, that's a hard one though, because that's like asking, who's your favorite kid, if you're a dad or whatever. But so every chapter I loved. I think my favorite chapter though is probably the one called Ms. Gasconade, which is about my wife's story and the things that she struggled with without giving away anything in the book. But it's interesting because I've told that story throughout the years at Journeys Crossing and some other places that I've been. And I always it always comes at the end of a message, and it has this very abrupt kind of ending. It's like, she went through all this, and then we got married, okay? So that's how I finished the chapter when I first wrote it, and my daughter said, no, you're not gonna write it like that. You're gonna have to. So they encouraged me to go back and tell the romantic story of Donna and I, how we got together and stuff. And so I guess that's the reason that's my favorite chapter, is because it let me go back and kind of relive my courtship with Donna, which was amazing and fun. So I think Miss Gasconade is my favorite chapter.
Was that the hardest to write then too, or was there another one?
So that one was hard. I think the hardest one probably was Dear Acceptance, which is a story where I go through some of the hard things in adolescence. And I was a real jerk as I was kind of trying to process through my low self-esteem. And what I did was I became like a verbal arsonist. I ripped into other people. And so that was hard to relive that, and it was hard to confess that. And so, that was probably the hardest stuff. That was probably the hardest stuff to write down.
As I'm reading through this, I like you said, the stories, right? You did it through stories, and I just like how they fit together, and knowing you now, getting to see where, your whole story, and knowing where God brought you through them is just a really cool picture. And so anybody who reads this book is going to just be drawn in to these stories, and it's impossible to not see God in it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, stories are powerful, right? I mean, that's why Jesus used them, right? Primarily, I think there's one verse in the Bible that says he didn't teach anything without using a story. So stories are powerful because they're memorable and they have a way of kind of drawing you in. So that's what I'm hopeful the reader will find.
Well, we have some people here, but we also have some people who wanted to share a little bit about what they thought of the book, but couldn't be here with us.
Okay.
So we're gonna break away for just a minute and catch some of those videos right now.
Hi, I'm Kristen. I am actually Darin's sister. So really super excited for him and this book. It's a great book. I'm lucky to be one of the first people that got to read it. And so I'm so excited for him and this adventure that he's on. I really love short stories, and that's what this book is, the format. I love it that you can read a chapter, put it down, pick it back up in a couple weeks. I did not do that with this book. I read it pretty quickly. I couldn't put it down. It was amazing. I laughed, I cried. I love how he tied everything in at the end of the chapter. It wasn't just entertaining, but it was thought-provoking as well. So I just love that aspect of it. I'm going to buy copies for all my friends. I'm just super excited for this. I'm super excited for him. And go Darin.
Well, hey there, Mark Wilkinson here, lead pastor of Journeys Crossing, and I want to give a shout out to my good friend Darin Brown on the new release of his first book called Crooked River Stories. You know, it's hard to believe that I've known Darin almost 30 years and had the privilege of working side by side with him in ministry over the last 20. And I really don't know if you'd find a person who loves other people nearly as much as Darin does if you search the world over. And his book actually gives you just a small taste of some of the people that he's loved really well over the years. You see, one of the things that makes Darin so special is his enthusiasm for the kingdom. Well, that and his quirky humor that always made me laugh. But here's a guy that grew up in a poor family on the back roads of rural Missouri and who had the guts to leave it all behind and go on an adventure with God. From a small town on the banks of a crooked river, Darin moved to the fast-paced life of some of the larger cities on the East Coast. And it didn't stop there. In the past 20 years, he's led hundreds of ordinary people on mission trips around the globe. From Paris, France to Taiwan and Nicaragua and Uganda, the Ivory Coast, Paraguay, Ecuador, and on and on. Darin has traveled a long way from home. Most would be a fish out of water in this kind of adventure. But Darin's strong confidence in God and his deep love for all people have actually made his name known and loved in remote villages and schools and towns most of us will never get a chance to visit. Listen, his stories are refreshing and heartwarming and funny. I really hope you'll pick up a copy of his book. I promise you won't regret it. Now, admittedly, it's not the same as working side by side for 20 years with him. Not everybody's as fortunate to have done so like I have, but reading his book, listen, may be the next best thing. So grab a copy, make yourself a hot cup of coffee or tea and cozy up in a corner and get to know Darin a little bit through his book. And before you know it, you'll be off on an adventure with him that'll warm your heart, will make you laugh or cry, and most importantly, will realize that stepping out in faith with God, no matter who you are, is never a bad thing.
All right, so before Darin sent this book off to the publishers, he invited some beta readers or some test readers to take a look at his book and give him some feedback. And the first one of those we have here with us today is Scott Velasquez. Scott, you were mentioned a couple times in this book, including in the acknowledgments. Could you take a couple minutes and just talk about your friendship with Darin?
Yeah.
And you were quoted, what was it? You kicked Darin's butt to get this book done.
I tried,
So,
I tried. Being friends with Darin over the years, Darin kind of early in the process said, I'm writing a book. And I thought, wow, that's fascinating. Okay, great. Do you need help with that? And, you know, we've been friends for a long, long time. And so I put a reminder in my to-do list once every couple of weeks just to say, ask Darin about his book. So I would shoot him off an email.
Awesome.
And say, hey, you working on the book? And in the last couple of years, the response has been yes. Yeah, I'm working. I did this chapter. I'm working on this little piece of it. I'm getting it done. So I'm really excited to see this. I'm be able to hold it and have it in my hand, and it's great.
Actually have it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So can you just share maybe a couple of thoughts you have after reading the book?
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Getting to know Darin, I've known Darin 20 plus years, and from his time as a youth pastor in New York, I was a youth pastor in New York, and we became friends that way, and worked at a camp that's talked about in this book in one of the chapters, and we've gotten to go on tons of adventures together. One of the things that I love about this book so much is the storytelling kind of mirrors the Crooked River. So he'll be telling a story and then take this turn that applies it to your life, even if you're not from Missouri or
Yeah.
didn't grow up on a river or whatever. The word pictures are so rich, and but the storytelling and then the application to life has just been really, it was just amazing to read. You know, he's one of my best friends, so I'm like, okay, yes, I'll read your book, and I'm sure I'll like it. But when I read it, I really liked it.
Nice.
And I thought, wow, this is a really great book. Another thing that I love about it is, Darin alluded to this a little bit earlier, was the honesty and the transparency of it. So he doesn't paint, he doesn't tie everything up with a nice little bow.
Right.
You know, he talks about real life, how it really happens, and how it winds. And as it does that, you get wrapped up in the stories, you get wrapped up in the characters, it's a very helpful book. I've found it to be very helpful.
Yeah, it's like it grabs you and it takes you back, even though it's not that long ago.
To
But
places you've never
but
been
it's
before.
Like,
Yeah,
it's
I've
like
never
it
been
takes
to
you to
Missouri.
some place in a different time you've not been in.
Yeah.
I agree. Well,
Yeah.
thanks, Scott, for taking a minute and sharing with us about the book.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Hey, my guess is that probably over the last month or so, you've asked somebody the question, what do you want for Christmas now? Right? Now, if you ask a kid that question, you're going to get a list, and it's going to be a very detailed, very specific list, because they know what they want. They're not afraid or embarrassed to tell you. If you ask a teenager, you're probably going to get the same response that Randy Moss, the wide receiver for the Vikings, once gave somebody. He said, straight cash, homie. That's what teenagers and young adults probably want. You know, don't even mess with the card, just Venmo me the money, right?
All right, next up we have Darin's friend Todd Taskey with us. Thanks for joining us today for this book launch. So you and Darin have been friends for a lot of years. What did you think when he shared with you that he was going to write this book?
You know, Darin's a great storyteller, and I've been fortunate to listen to a lot of those stories from, you know, a stage at Journey's Crossing. So,
Yeah.
you know, to have those in one place and a place to be able to refer back to them, I was excited to see, because you only get so much time at church to talk, and to be able to spend more time with each of the stories was fun to do.
That's cool. And he said that you were the first person, other than some people helping him edit it, that read the book through.
Mm-hmm.
So do you remember what you said to Darin and how you encouraged him to move forward with the book?
Yeah, you know, I don't think it works like that. You know, I think, I think if you have to convince somebody to write a book, you know, and people force stories out, that you know, there's not really a book in there.
Yeah.
Right? And I think maybe more people should follow that advice. Darin's not one of those guys. And I think people either feel like they have to get the story out, like Darin talked about, or they don't. And Darin had multiple stories, and so I didn't say anything to him. I just, you know, listened and you know, because not many people get to the finish line where they really produce an actual book. So it's a great accomplishment.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because when you read it, it's not forced, it's authentic. It's just somebody sharing what's on their heart, and you can tell that. Yeah. So tell us, before you go, why did you enjoy the book?
You know, I think that there's a lot of stories that are great stories about the guy who kills the dragon or the woman that accomplishes something big, and that's hard for us, I think, to identify with, because we don't get those chances in life, right?
Right.
The great majority of life is you got to show up again on Tuesday and then again on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And if you do that over a long enough period of time, you reach as many people as Darin has as a pastor, as people do showing up at work, as people do showing up as parents. And to identify with a guy that I've known for a long time but didn't know all of the backstory, the encouragement that comes from just, you know, showing up again.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the stories, as most young boys are, just stories about being dumb young boys. But if you can kind of continue to plow forward and think a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish in your life and just chip away at that a little bit every day, as Darin said, the river, you know, makes its own path. So I enjoyed most being able to identify with something like that.
While he was speaking that message, I was remembering a story I heard about a guy who wanted to join this very disciplined group of monks that lived in this monastery way out in the middle of nowhere. And this group of monks took a vow of silence. They were only allowed to speak 2 words a year. This guy got admittance into this group, and at the end of the first year, he used his 2 words to say, bed hard. Those were the 2 words that he used. At the end of the second year, he used his 2 words to say, food cold. And at the end of the third year, he used his 2 words to say, I quit. At which point the leader of the monastery said, you know what? I'm not surprised you've been complaining since you got here. I hear you laughing out there, right?
All right, so next up we have Jay here with us. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So this book that Darin wrote, why do you think it's so important for people to read it?
You know, this, as people have mentioned, the stories are very real, very authentic. Sometimes I find that when we have things bottled up inside, they don't always come out just by being told you have this inside. But the stories, the way they are communicated through this book, really touch deep parts of people's spirit, particularly for myself, and allows us to have a little bit of a catharsis, and allows us to have a bit of a release and even some soul healing. Especially when you see that even though some of these stories are very difficult to read sometimes, they're also filled with perseverance and hope. When you have perseverance, that you can actually come out on the other side better than you were before. So absolutely, I think this is a book that some people should read. It's easy to read, it's very easy, very casual read, but definitely will catch you off guard in a good way.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that you shared with Darin was that there was a point where you got so filled with emotion that you had to put this book down for a couple days before you could come back to it. So without revealing anything you don't want to reveal, what was that? What happened? Why?
No spoilers.
Yeah.
There are a couple of points in this book. Darin mentioned Dear Acceptance. I think probably cut very deep with some of my own things that I have inside that I, again, didn't come out for a while, but it's good to get in touch with them and face them. A number of the stories were the way Darin tells these stories. They're very, many of them are very strong without being overly dramatic. They're very straightforward and honest and authentic. So it kind of catches you off guard. The story of I know I'm going to murder his name, Kabede, and seeing how humble and how kind and really how Christian this gentleman was, and then reading about the horrors that he went through was just it can be very challenging, very challenging. And then there's also parts of it that really are just so touching and poignant. One story of Darin when he's declared free, which really, really touched me deeply. The notion that, the struggles that a young child has, especially when they're in poverty and afraid of being found out, and how there are people in your lives who can give you a little grace and actually give you some real release. So. A lot of points in the book like that, and I tell you, it's like a roller coaster. So one of my favorite chapters at the end is at the end of the book, because it's like that calm at the end of a long roller coaster, taking you through all the journeys that go through the book. I really felt it was probably one of the best parts of the book for me. So.
Yeah, for sure. I liked near the end of the book too, just the picture of, I can't give it all away, but like Darin now has his own daughter, and the whole, it's like, full circle. I'm not going to give anything away. You have to read it.
You have to read all the way to the end.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today, Jay.
Thanks for having me.
Give Jay a hand.
But we need to talk about all this, because I don't think a lot of this stuff is going to go away anytime soon. In fact, if you're buying into the fact that as soon as we get a vaccine or as soon as there's a change in the administration, that'll bring the cure for what's ailing us, well, then I have some swampland to offer you from Florida.
All right, so we're going to continue with my friend Sharon Walker. Hey, Sharon.
Hey, how are you, Brooke?
Good. It's good to have you here. So I'm asking you some total surprise questions. You have no idea what I'm going to say, and that sounds fun. What could I say? No, I won't be mean.
Okay.
If you were to give this book a rating on 1 to 5 stars, what would your rating be and why?
Definitely a 5 out of 5. I think, as I told Darin when I was giving him some of the feedback, it's just a range of emotions. I mean, I felt everything when I was reading this book. I was laughing. When he was telling a story about how he called himself a skinny little, I think it was like a skinny little rat with chicken legs, how he told the story about like how he had secret kisses in the back seat with Donna. I mean, he was just so raw. And then the next chapter, I'm crying about the story with Donna and how she lost, well, I'm not going to give it away, but I was crying about a story regarding Donna. So I just had all the emotions. It was so raw. It was so real. And the whole time I could hear Darin like actually telling me the stories
Right.
I'm reading it.
Hear his
So
voice,
it was
right?
so authentic. It was just, yeah, definitely 5 stars.
Awesome, awesome. So what was your favorite chapter in the
Oh,
book?
my goodness. I knew you were going to probably ask
Or
this
even just
one.
a story.
You know what? I think my favorite story, and I know again, like Jay, I'm gonna probably like not say his name right, but the wonderful gentleman from Ethiopia.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Bidi? I hope I said that right. But he was so humble, and just hearing like his life story and what he had to go through to get where he was, it's truly a story of perseverance. And that is the entire Crooked River Stories book, is all about perseverance.
Right. Yeah.
So that really kind of touched me because someone from so far away had such an impact as I was reading this book. So I really enjoyed that story.
Yeah, and it reminds us that we're all united in that, right? We all have to persevere
Absolutely.
at one time or another.
Absolutely.
So we can all relate to those stories.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sharon, for
You're
coming
welcome.
by.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What a crazy, crazy week we've had, right? I mean, last week the big thing we were talking about was time change Sunday. Did you get enough sleep? And now we're in a pandemic, the coronavirus. I think church history will refer to this in the future as Corona Sunday. Now think about those two words together and go back, let's say 6 months, and we're having Corona Sunday, right? You'd probably think it's some kind of Mexican beer promotion to get more men to come to church, right? Corona Sunday, but
All right, so we have one last visitor today. My friend Tiffany Ho is here. It's good to see you.
To see you.
I haven't seen you in a while. It's nice to see you. So you went on a trip to Ethiopia with Darin to do some missions work with Food for the Hungry. I think I said that right. And while you were there, you met Kavede.
Yes.
Yeah, and we've heard other people talk about his story and how meaningful it was to them. So what did you learn from him while you were there? Maybe what did you learn from Kabede's story?
Well, we often hear about strong faith, and his faith is truly remarkable. I mean, hearing Kadebe's story truly humbled me, and it really encouraged me. And one thing that really encouraged me is that when Kadebe found his identity in Christ, like who he was, it was like embedded in him. Like he can't let that go. Like when he was in prison, even when he was in prison, in the unbearable pain he was going through, he stood firm on truth and he held on to it, and that really encouraged me. And it kind of reminds me, it kind of goes back to, I think, Matthew. It mentions in Matthew where Jesus did mention, like, you know, they may kill your body, don't be afraid, but they can't kill your soul. So that just really encouraged me. It was very powerful. Yeah, I'm just in awe of his perseverance, his strength, his courage, of his story. So I'm just very thankful that he gets to share it in Darin's book.
Yeah. And what did you enjoy most about Crooked River Stories?
Okay,
Was
so
it that story or something else?
well, the book overall, I enjoyed the whole book, all the stories in the book. What I really truly enjoyed was Darin's childhood to his like coming of age into his like young adulthood. there are bits and pieces that we can all relate to with like the insecurity and the awkwardness and then just like trying to navigate like the romantic relationships. But yeah, but to a certain degree, not as intense as like I don't know anyone who's like fell off like a cliff or broken a collarbone. So it was just really fun to read, you know, his childhood and his coming of age story. And I just want to give a quick shout out also to Donna's story that really touched my heart. I mean, the grief was immense and just like the deep sorrow that she went through in those times. But she really showed a godly example in the midst of those unbearable pains and those dark times that she went through. And that just truly encouraged me.
Yeah, encourages our faith to
Yes.
see how other people struggle and deal with things. And what I'm hearing from you is that we can all kind of find a piece of ourself somewhere,
Yeah.
you know, in the overall story. So
Yes.
that's great. Well, thanks for coming, Tiffany. It's so
Thank
great to see
you
you,
for
have you
having me.
here.
Thank you.
Just speaking personally, one of the biggest losses for me has been not that there's no toilet paper, but that there's no sports, right? I'm really missing sports. Last week, early in the week, they were talking about not canceling the whole events, but they were talking about having the events, but with no fans in the stands. And they thought that was just like some novel kind of thing. I'm like, no, that happens every year. It's called a Redskins home game.
Well, hey, Darin. So those were some incredible thoughts by people who read your book, who helped you through the process. And obviously, we're all really excited about your book, and I know a lot of people out there are too. So could you help us know how to get a hold of your book? Where can we buy it? What can we do?
Okay. So first I want to thank all the beta readers, everyone who was on the program tonight. That's awesome. Huge encouragers to me because you put something out there and
Right.
you just want to get some feedback about whether or not you think people might resonate with it. So thanks to all of you who did that. It was a huge part of the process. So the book right now is going to land on Amazon. They're dropping it February the 17th. You can pre-order it now. So everyone orders on Amazon, so that's easy enough. Just type in Crooked River Stories. That's how you can get it. It's also available right now through the publisher who did it. So you go to store.bookbaby.com. Again, type in Crooked River Stories, you can get it there. It's available in ebook version, all that kind of stuff too. So it's there. And I do want to give a shout out to the can I borrow your book for a second?
Yeah.
So this cover design was done by a guy from Journey's Crossing, Lance Lagos. Big shout out to Lance. The first version that the publisher did was it just wasn't what we were looking
you
for.
wanted, yeah.
And so I said, Lance, give us some help here. And so he came up with that concept, and they did some work with it as well. But appreciate Lance and all that. But anyway, thanks for everyone coming out and supporting the book. I hope it helps. I would actually love to hear from people. Their Crooked River Stories. So I'm going to do something you probably shouldn't do, but I'm going to give everyone my email address. Okay. So it's Darin Brown, 1981. It's DARIN Brown 1981 at yahoo.com. Love to hear your stories, your Crooked River stories, so we can kind of encourage each other on the journey. Love to do that with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you to those of you who are here to support Darin, and spread the word to everyone you know about this book. Thanks. We're so excited about it, Darin.
Thank you. Very excited.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Brooke.